Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Hello again and welcome to Fusion Mobile e-learning class. My name is Abubakar Abdul, and as always this is civic education. Now in this video we are going to be talking about constitutional democracy. We'll be looking at the meaning of constitutional democracy. We'll be looking at the features or characteristics of constitutional democracy. We'll be looking at the advantages and disadvantages of constitutional democracy, and then finally we are going to look at key concepts in constitutional democracy. We'll be looking at election, majority rule, sovereignty, legislature, presidency, and judicial review. Now the first on our item here is the meaning of constitutional democracy. What is constitutional democracy? Basically, constitutional democracy refers to the practice of a democratic culture based on the rule of law and the constitution. It is purely a democratic government, society, governance, and practice based on constitutional provisions and support. That's basically what constitutional government is. It's the practice of a democratic culture based on the rule of law and the constitution. That's basically what constitutional democracy means. So now, what are the features of constitutional democracy? What are the features of constitutional democracy? Before we look at the features of constitutional democracy, it is good for us to actually make note of the types of constitutional democracy, where it's mainly divided into two types. The first part is a constitutional monarchism, and the second one is constitutional republicanism. Constitutional monarchism that is one type of constitutional democracy, and the second one is constitutional republicanism. Constitutional monarchism and constitutional republicanism. Now the first one, that's constitutional monarchism. Under this arrangement, the democracy hinges on the consent of the people to form a government headed by a constitutional monarch, devoid of absolute power as the head of the executive arm of government. The monarch is supported by separate bodies, namely the legislature and the judiciary. Now the first one is the constitutional monarchism. Now under this arrangement, the democracy hinges on the consent of the people to form a government headed by the constitutional monarch, devoid of absolute powers as the head of the executive arm of government. Now the monarch is supported by separate bodies, that is the legislature and the judiciary. Now under the second type of constitutional democracy, when we're talking about the republicanism, this form of constitutional democracy promoted the liberty of the masses to completely choose their leaders without traditional or colonial restrictions. It allows the people to complete independence in drafting their own laws, choosing their own leaders, and economic ideology. So basically that's the difference between the republicanism. Promotes the liberty of masses to completely choose their leaders without traditional or colonial restrictions, while the constitutional monarchism hinges on the consent of the people to form a government headed by a constitutional monarch, devoid of absolute powers as the head of the executive arms of government. Now since we've established that, let's go back to the features of constitutional democracy. What are the features of constitutional democracy? The following are some of the features of constitutional democracy. Number one, constitutional government. Number two, majority rule. Number three, partisan ideology. Number four, respect for or predominance of the rule of law. Number five, periodically free and fair elections. Number six, independence of the judiciary. Number seven, classism. Number 8, a government accountable to the people. Number 9, equal participation in the political process. And then number 10, informed electorate. All these are some of the features of constitutional democracy. All these are some of the features of constitutional democracy that we have. I've mentioned about 10 of them, and I'm hoping that that is about enough for you to establish whatever point it is that you are asked to establish. Now, before we continue to the advantages of constitutional democracy, a question is going to pop up on your screen right now, and I'm confident that you are going to answer that question without any difficulty. Here's the question. Welcome back from that question, and I am confident you answered that question correctly. Now, before the question popped up, we were talking about the features of constitutional democracy, and we mentioned about 10 of them. Now, let us look at the advantages of constitutional democracy. What are the advantages? What are the benefits of constitutional democracy? Some of the advantages of constitutional democracy include: number 1, constitutional democracy allows the need and political ideologies of modern states to be accommodated without global conflict. Number 2, it has been used to abolish or stop feudal, theocratic, and autocephalous, that is, independence dictatorship. Number 3, it has helped in the political stabilization of states as its practice brings about peace. Number 4, the supremacy of the Constitution and the laws gives the needed direction, thereby overriding any individual caprice. Number 5, it sustains smooth transition to leadership. Number 6, it encourages patriotism. Number 7, constitutional democracy encourages political mass participation through its insistence on periodic elections, universal adult suffrage, and voter education. And then the last one we're going to take is equity, fair play, equality of persons, and fundamental human rights are virtues promoted in constitutional democracy due to the predominance of the rule of law. All these are advantages of constitutional democracy. Now, let's just look at the disadvantages of constitutional democracy. Everything that has an advantage always has disadvantage. So let's look at the disadvantages of constitutional democracy, and these disadvantages include: number 1, in most cases the representative of the masses seek their own personal interests instead of the interests of those who elected them. Number 2, in constitutional democracy the dictatorship of the majority merely replaces dictatorship by one powerful man. In this case, the majority can dictate and overrule in spite of the fact that they could be ignorant, foolish, or sentimental, as in the case of ethnic chauvinism. Number 3, representative democracy appears to be expensive when one considers the cost of funding the electoral institution, the public office holders to be paid, running political parties, media propaganda, and public enlightenment. Number 4, it slows down decision making. Number 5, it introduces electioneering problems and promotes partisanism, that is, division along party lines. Number 6, constitutional democracy produces only few political leaders. Number 7, it encourages corruption in government. Number 8, constitutional democracy operates rigidly and does not easily yield to change, meant to take care of urgent or abhorrent situations. All these are some of the disadvantages of constitutional democracy. We've looked at the advantages of constitutional democracy, and now we've looked at the disadvantages of constitutional democracy. And now finally, let us look at some key concepts in constitutional democracy, key elements. Number 1, we have election, majority rule, sovereignty, legislature, presidency, and judicial review. So let's pick the first one, which is election. And see what it has to say here. So election here, election here is a key concept in constitutional democracy. refers to the process of selecting leaders and occupiers of political offices by means of voting. It is through election that a political leader acquires the mandate of the people. Obviously, you have to go through election for you to actually emerge as a winner, to emerge deserving of a particular political office. Certain offices are appointment. They normally does not have to involve voting also, but in a situation where it involves the majority of the citizens, like maybe the office of the governor, councillor, chairman, House of Reps, the Senate, all these are offices that you can not acquire without the process of election. So election is a key concept when we're talking about constitutional democracy. Now the next one is majority rule. Of course, when we talk about majority rule, you know, we're talking about the process where the majority of the citizens in a particular country, in a particular nation, determine who the representatives are going to be. Majority rule here, this is the concept used in modern democracy to show a divide among electors or voters. Depending on what the winner procedure is, the voters are classified as belonging either to the minority or to the majority. Minority are, of course, the classification that actually lose the election, those who have less numbers, and the majority are expected or are regarded as those with more numbers. So majority rule basically in constitutional, or as a concept in constitutional democracy, is talking about the divide. It's talking about the divide between voters, the voters that emerge as those who supported the winning candidate and those who supported the losing candidate, depending on their number. The next one is sovereignty. Sovereignty means supreme power enjoyed by an autonomous or independent state or self-directed government. We have internal and external sovereignty. Internal sovereignty is the power given to a state to control every person and institution within its territory. External sovereignty of the state makes it to operate on its own and is beyond being dictated to by any other external force or state. So basically, sovereignty is when a nation has attained independence and it's in charge of its own laws, its own activities. Basically, that's what sovereignty means, and it's a very key concept in constitutional democracy, because for you to enjoy democracy, of course, you must have observed independence, you must have acquired, you must have gotten independence, you're an independent person. That's how you enjoy democracy. So when you're talking about sovereignty, of course, you're talking about a situation where you can, or where you have the ability to dictate your own laws, where you have the activity to live by your own rules, when you have independent and there's no outer source, there's no other source out there influencing your activities. That's what sovereignty here basically means. So now legislature. Of course, we do know that legislature basically is the arm of government that is in charge of making laws, So legislature is a very, very important key concept when it comes to when it comes to constitutional democracy, because of course you need laws to survive. You need the legislature to create the laws, reasonable laws, realistic laws that could be observed in a society or in a country. So legislature is a very, very, very important key concept in constitutional democracy. Then here we have the presidency. The presidency is the chief executive that's in the cabinet system. The president is a ceremonial figurehead. The actual powers lies on the prime minister, who is the head of government and de facto leader. Now Nigeria, of course, we don't have right now we don't practice we don't have room for prime ministers. The presidency is not just the ceremonial head, he is the actual head of the country. Of course, each country, each nation needs a leader, and that's where the presidency comes in. The presidency is that leader, is that number one citizen in the nation. Like in Nigeria, currently 2016, the president of Nigeria is President Muhammadu Buhari. So he is the president of Nigeria and he occupies that office. So now the last one we have here is the judicial review. The judicial review here, this is a tool used by the judiciary to justify or condemn laws made by the legislatures or executives through delegated legislation. When a law is reviewed, it is meant to remove obnoxious elements which could encourage autocracy, injustice, inequality, and inequity. When a law exceeds its bounds to injure the common man, the court declares it null and void. That is ultra vires. Now, basically, that is the purpose of the judicial review, or that's what judicial review is all about when we're talking about a key concept in constitutional democracy. So basically, that's what we have for this video as regards constitutional democracy. We've looked at the meaning, the features, advantages, disadvantages of constitutional democracy, and finally we have looked at some key concepts in constitutional democracy. Some questions are going to pop up on your screen right about now, and I'm confident you're going to answer them without any difficulty. Until I see you in the next video, bye bye for now.